podcast focused on trends shaping the future of manufacturing. I'm Alexandria Burek, your host, here with A.W. Schultz, two thought leaders with a passion for people and manufacturing. Today and every episode, we are diving deep into the advancements, sustainable practices, and dynamic changes transforming how we produce everything.
And now welcome Alexandria Burek and A.W. Schultz.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Factory of the Future. I'm with A.W. Schultz. I'm Alexandria Burek. And today we're going to talk about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, women in manufacturing. So first, A.W. is going to bring us up to speed and give us this amazing overview of women's history and contributions to the manufacturing industry. And then I will share some real life experiences and hopefully some tactical actions we can all take to make manufacturing more inclusive and, all those good things. So, AW, give us a history here.
Well, thanks for the introduction, Alexandria. And yes, so this is a topic probably does not get talked about enough, in my opinion, just from where I tend to circle around. And what's interesting about it is I don't think there's really a lot of devoted history to it as far as women in manufacturing. So the way we thought we'd approach this is, one, go through a little bit of a history of where we are at and where we're going. And then Alexander kind of gives some interesting statistics of where we are today and some of the things that we can do in the regular workplace to help support women in manufacturing. So the evolution of women in manufacturing follows a similar timeline as the Industrial Revolution. Dating back to the 1700s, 1800s, it began with women in the textile mills, factories, in significant numbers because we were dealing with the labor shortage, especially in Britain, where a lot of the history of the Industrial Revolution really resonates. Like I said, they were primarily worked in the textiles, clothing, and food processing. And, it stayed within that point up to the 1800s, early 1900s. And what's interesting is there was also one key development of formation of women's labor unions. Now, I interpret that as, they need to form a union. Well, usually organizations, don't want unions. And when there's unions being asked upon, it's usually the discussion about labor rights. So this could be an early indication about what was going on during that time. Extended hours, low pay, high expectations. But if we move forward to World War II there was that point where a lot of the male soldiers, and particularly I'm thinking about the U.S., that's where I tend to resonate around, were deployed, and women filled their jobs in metal working, machinery, and other different skills that were needed for men that the women's weren't part of. Now, following the end of World War II, there was that interwar period. And we're going to talk about two of those. The first one was after World War I. No big guess what the next one is. Many women were pushed out of the manufacturing jobs as the men returned. Some retained their positions, but it was a lighter workload or manufacturing expectations were put upon them. Many still remained in the textiles and the consumer goods industries. Now, moving into World War II, and this is that point where you see the ladies with the pictures and showing their muscles as they return back to the manufacturing. And part of building these massive of aircrafts and tanks and other military components and weapons that were needed for the war, and they filled the gap that where the men were deployed from. And this was up to 1945 when the end of World War II. And this saw a significant reduction in the manufacturing workforce as the men returned again. And now in this time, we start talking about our baby boomers that starts coming along. Now in the modern era, which is really it's 1970s up to a lot of places today, there hasn't been a big shift or movement around what we have of what we've seen as far as a evolution in women in manufacturing. There's also the discussion about the integration of management into technical roles, the increased presence of high-tech manufacturing, and a lot of these other things that Alexandria want to bring forward. So I wanted to kind of set the stage with what was some kind of the history of it. And you can kind of see as there probably could be a lot more developed onto where these women are in the history and some of the accomplishments they have. But what we really wanted to go was kind of deep into kind of set the stage of where women were in manufacturing and where we see them today, and some tips and strategies we can see as being ways that we can try to bridge that gap, because there's definitely a difference between the amount of men and women in this sector.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Thanks.
Alexandria.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was a great history. And I think one thing, I'm sort of like a history buff or World War II person. I really like reading about those topics and different war eras. So I'm a big fan of Rosie Riveter. Actually, I dressed up as Rosie Riveter for Halloween one year. Ironically, of course, I was working at a manufacturing plant. So
Yeah, it just seems fit.
yeah, all those things there. But in reading about women and the roles they've played in even military, it's what you're talking about with the documentation or like the acknowledgement of women's role in manufacturing is very similar to what we see when we're looking back on the history of women's contributions to different war efforts or different situations similar. So sad to say it, but it is what it is. Women typically took a back seat and were playing a supporting role. And so hopefully with what we're going to cover here today on this podcast and the efforts that we make as a society, we can shift that. And I'm really excited to talk about that today. So a couple of things I was hoping to bring up was sort of this inverse relationship with women and men in leadership roles, right? So we see that, there's a 70-30 mix to start with women and men in manufacturing, 70% of which are men and 30% of which are women. So if things were relatively equal or fair, you could expect that same trend would continue in all levels of the organization, right? So because there's just a larger share of men in manufacturing, you would expect that, okay, well then there's likely 70% are in leadership roles or 30% of women are also in leadership roles. But what is a little bit confusing, challenging, sad, whatever you want to look at it is as you move up the ladder, you see that more and more the men's share is continually increasing while the women's share is decreasing. So, while 70% are in first level management of men and 30% are women, by the time you make it to senior level positions, 79% are men and only 21% are women. So I think that there's a lot of different factors that contribute to that. There's many outside of the decisions that are made in the workplace and decisions made by leadership and hiring and all that, right? There's women who leave to raise children. There's women who leave manufacturing in general. And I don't want to spend too much time thinking or talking about that today. What I was hoping to really focus on is the women that stay. So for those of us that remain in manufacturing, what are these challenges? How can men and all leaders kind of, like you said, bridge the gap? And then what can women do themselves? Because I'm a big believer in taking ownership of your own life. I'm a big believer in, finding your control in these situations. Like the victim mindset is not going to help anybody, but there are some real challenges that we need to be aware of. And I think everybody can work towards kind of being better here. So I've seen it and experienced it many times, but there seems to be an inherent bias. It's been scientifically studied that leaders generally have a hiring bias. So, for example, if there was a black woman in a role previously, and then there were two candidates to select to replace that candidate, and one was a black woman and another was maybe a Mexican guy, we'll say. We'll just go off chart here. The natural bias would be to choose the black woman because that position previously held was by a black woman and it was done well. And so typically we would expect that. And this is not something that people are even generally aware of. So it's not a conscious decision to say, oh, a black woman was in that job, and so naturally a black woman will be good at this job. It's just a bias that happens almost in the background that we don't even realize.
Bias.
Yeah, it's unconscious. So it's not like somebody's being a particular way. It's just really that there's these biases that are operating under the surface that we're just not aware of. And so the first step is obviously being aware of it, right? And I do believe that this contributes to a large reason in that inverse relationship we talked about, why women aren't being considered for leadership roles is because of this bias, right? So if we're used to seeing a guy in this position and then there's a guy and a woman of equal qualifications, background, whatever, I've seen it, I've experienced it, where typically the guy gets it, right? For really no other reason, no explicable reason, when all things otherwise are considered equal. So hopefully we can look to, change that and get more women in these positions. So the bias is more 50-50, I guess you could say. And then I think the other thing here is that the bias plays into some other issues that we see, right? So things like career advancement and mentorship. So if women aren't being promoted into these positions, or if women, are watching different scenarios shake out, and maybe a woman and a man equal qualifications go for something, and then the man's chosen, all the other women who are seeing who she went for it, excuse me, the signal to them is, you're not going to get it, so why bother trying, right? So on the flip side of that, when there's the mentorship side of things. So when women are put in those positions, what women can do is mentor other women underneath them, advocate for their advancement, right? So there's some stat like 41% of women say they don't feel like there's an opportunity for them to advance in manufacturing. 37% of women feel like there's a limited mentorship. So again, not going to say that anybody's being racist or sexist in any way, but it's natural to gravitate towards people like you. That's just a human inclination that nobody can deny. So what can we all do, right? Because there's actions women can take to position themselves to be in these leadership roles and in these rooms that where the deals are being made, or where the people who make the decisions are circulating and hanging out. So I'll give an example. Let's say there's a group of guys of all various levels of the organization. So maybe some are some leaders, some are some middle managers, and some are your, counterparts, and you're a woman. If they're regularly going out to happy hour, you need to find a way to get into that happy hour, because that's where relationships are being built. That's where conversations are being had, information is being exchanged, and you're falling behind if you're not involved in that and you're not finding a way to get into that situation. So be seen and be with the group of people that are leading and making the leadership decisions. The second thing, which seems strange to say, but I've seen it and I've experienced it and I've called it out, and I've told other women not to do this, but do not ever fall into any kind of gender roles in the office. So it could be your natural inclination, just as who you are, to be helpful. But you need to be very careful about that. So don't be the meeting note taker. Okay, you're nobody's secretary. You're their equal. They should be responsible for taking their own notes. Do not order meals or plan meals or parties or anything like that. Like, if men aren't doing it, you as a woman shouldn't be doing it either, because by doing those actions, even though they're helpful, even though they're above and beyond, they're putting you in a different category of worker, and it's not going to advocate for your promotion. It would advocate for you being stagnant and stationary where you're at. So, also ask for mentorship. ask and be regular about communicating your interest in growth. Like, some of the reasons that men make more money is because they counteroffer when they're given a salary offer. Most men counteroffer, most women don't. So maybe the reason more men are getting mentored and being considered for opportunities is because they're communicating that. So we as women, we need to also advocate for ourselves. No one is advocating for you like you, so advocate for yourself. That's kind of what my advice to women out in the workforce would be.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah.
some of those? So in your experience, how have you dealt with it when there's a meeting coming up and there's a guy in Alexander. Hey, Alexander, what's good to eat around here? Like, well, there's this and this. You think you could call them? I don't know what to do. I've never planned anything in this. You think you could help out? I mean, what do you do in those situations? Because that's usually how the introduction comes, and you don't want to be like, well, you can figure it out yourself. But,
Yeah.
How do you disparage or discourage those from those situations?
I would say that early in my career, I would have done that, and I did do that a lot, right? Like, I took on this very feminine roles and gender roles of whatever, where I would gladly do those things. And part of that was why people liked me, and that really helped me at that point in my career develop relationships that then later contributed to the success of my teams. However, as I stepped into more leadership roles, I just embodied more of what a man would do. So, to be honest, it never even came up in most situations because I was so masculine in my approach to my job that honestly it didn't even remotely come up. Like, I was always about the only woman in the room in a boardroom, conference room situation when we're talking about logistics, manufacturing. It was the norm for me to be the only woman, and it was never ever even a thought. There was one time when I was out getting lunch and I offered to bring back lunch for my male counterparts because I was scheduling ridiculous amounts of meetings on their lunch hour to get a project accomplished. But it was more of just like that, I think, is okay. Like, you could be a genuinely good human. Like, hey, I'm grabbing lunch. Do you guys want me to go pick it up? I was also a cigarette smoker at the time, so they knew it was like code for me to go chug some cigarettes on the way to picking up sandwiches for us to eat while we work on the stuff that I wanted them to work on. So I think on one hand, you could still be a nice person and still do nice things for your team, but don't, I wasn't out there sending meeting notes to that team. I would refuse to do that. Or if somebody would dare ask me that, I'd be like, I'm not your wife. I am not your mom. I am not your girlfriend. No. That's probably how I would respond.
Yeah. And I guess earlier in my career, I didn't really notice it that much, but as I got older, and I'd still see women in that were in management positions above me. And I would see, they would push back. Mm-hmm. Diversely so, and they would, in a lot of cases, still step up to the plate in a lot of cases. But if it felt like the guys were just standing around doing anything, they would not help. But if there's two or three, usually the women would jump in. So let me ask you about it. So this is at because at the micro level, or at the macro. So if you broaden it out a little bit, and one of the things that I guess I've been told in the past, and this isn't just a women or dealing with it is dealing with sex, or it's dealing with people of diversity, is why is it always the culture of it white males? And I worked with this one lady one time, and she goes, "Well, where are you recruiting your folks from? Are you going to black universities if you're trying to get more diverse? No, you're just going to your locals." And okay, that's one way you can change it. You can have different organizations celebrate the different marks of education, celebration, and bring in just the different cultures within the workplace to foster conversations about it. So it becomes more not a male female, but just a building a culture of diversity. Yeah. And that was some of the advice that she had given me, and the term unconscious biases was one that that was one of her passions about it. So I've always kind of written that down and thought about it as like, how often have I been part of unconscious biases that I don't want to say, I've got one belief or not, but there's certain ways I was raised and certain things I expect when I go into a room, and certain things and you hear. I mean, you come into a meeting room and usually expect the leader to sit at the front of the desk, front of the office, and they're the first ones to say something, and the meeting starts, and they usually have the closing at the end. To me, that's like an unconscious bias. That's always the leader doing it.
Talking about tactical things that we can do. So I'm not gonna. Again, I'm gonna push back and not do what you just asked me to do. But I'm going to give you another idea that you just sparked for me. So one of the great things that I heard, I think this was Jeff Bezos who was talking about it, where in meetings at Amazon, the way they present in boardroom situations or in any type of meeting structure, everything always starts with the lowest person, like the lowest person on the totem pole, the person with the lowest seniority or management level. And what that does is, number one, it gives everyone a seat at the table to speak. And I've embodied this in the meetings that I run. So maybe we have like some of our more junior management roles that sit in our meetings, and I encourage them and ask them to talk first. And I say, we'll save the last person who will speak on this topic will be the director of our organization, of our department. So by doing those simple little things, you can really create an opportunity, right? Because some of our junior managers are most diverse. Most of our junior managers are women. Most of our mid managers are males. And I routinely, despite kind of probably the detriment to my personal career, I adamantly advocate for the women to be promoted into the management position. I was like, if all things are equal, you should give it to the woman, because you're setting a tone and you're setting an example that women can be promoted in our team. We want women on our team, and we believe that women can do the management roles. And every time that we are put against an option between the two, and we choose a male versus a woman, especially in the opportunity of an internal candidate is a woman and an external candidate is a man, that's an even worse slap in the face, in my opinion. So I advocate that, probably to my detriment, but I will continue to advocate for that. And that's why I, again, stand by this idea that women have a responsibility as well to help other women up the ladder. And, offering the mentorship is key. Advocating for their promotion is key. We need to be women who bring each other up and advocate for each other versus, saying it's not my life, not my problem. Like that also isn't going to really help the scenario. So, yeah. Did you have any other ideas, topics, or anything else you wanted to talk about on this?
Well, I like how you brought up, the talk about, women become pregnant and then they take those breaks, and, it plays a fact that, I know a lot of men, probably myself included, where it's always been a career first. Mm-hmm. And
it's not the same. It's just not the same.
And then the other example of negotiating salaries. And where men might feel more accustomed to it. Yeah. And then sometimes it's the male is the woman might follow the male on their career paths, and they've got less opportunities to go within some of their desired careers. But which is funny is that women have got more education than men, but men seem
especially now
to prosper on that. But yeah, I think it's an interesting topic, and I think it's something we can definitely explore in future episodes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's kind of where we wanted to go today on it.
Yeah.
And can I check out?
Yeah. I'm going to leave one final thing is just don't be a victim, be a part of the solution, be an advocate for yourself and be an advocate for others. This is true in every facet of life. And, there's one crucial lesson, and this goes to every single human who might be listening to this. No one is advocating for you. No one is negotiating on your behalf. No one is doing these things for you. So you need to be taking the the effort in doing it for yourself. So with that, that's all I have to say now. So I'm done. Okay, clocking out.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Yeah, we're checking out of here like finished goods. And stay tuned for our next episode. And again, thanks for joining us. And till next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
This is Factory the Future, and we are out of here like finished goods. Stay tuned for our next episode of Factory of the Future, where we're exploring groundbreaking techniques and behaviors that are reshaping industrial landscapes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review and help others discover the cutting-edge insights transforming manufacturing as we know it.